20 for the Beaver Area School District. We will start with board committee reports. Curriculum and staff development. Mrs. DeKetch is not here. Mr. Bickett?
Nothing to report. Oh, wait.
Oh, no, there is.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
She asked me to do it.
Oh, good, because I wasn't ready.
Mrs. Yates.
Good, thank you.
We had a meeting at College Square Elementary, and Christine Wagner reported on 3 high school changes, and none of them are requiring extra money for anything. The first is a new course that will be instituted for the 2021 school year, and it's designed to teach skills needed to be an app developer, so the students can bring their own ideas, and no prior computer skills or classes or anything are needed. This is open to the students. And this is going to be covered by Mr. Hank, and the tech, because he teaches the tech integration. He's a tech integration coach right now, and so he's going to do that. The second one is, I don't know if any of you remember, some of you are here regularly, but we changed the high school physics class to an advanced placement class, but now Pitt is saying that it isn't possible, and so we're changing it back. But if students want the college credit, then they can pay for it.
Yeah, so we have currently a college and high school CHS physics class, and it had changed some of their requirements, like Director Yates said, and it made it impossible for us to comply. So we pulled out of that agreement with Pitt for next year, and apparently a lot of other school districts did as well. So they had a change of heart and revised what they're requiring high schools to do, which was related to being enrolled in AP Calculus. You had to be concurrently enrolled in this physics course in AP Calculus, and we said, that's not going to work for us. In any case, they heard that, they changed their requirements, and so we're able to go back to CHS physics instead of adopting a new AP physics. That's the basics.
Okay, and the third was, there's something called Act 158, which changes the Pennsylvania school code and graduation requirements. So this change is going to impact our policy, our requirements, and our handbook. What it's going to do is affect our current 10th grade students. And already in law is the 4 pathways. How we go about it isn't determined yet. The last one is the evidence-based criteria, which is proposed, but we already do this. It's our portfolio program and our senior projects. So a lot of this will already be done by our students because we do the senior projects. And the last issue was our elementary principal, Dr. House, wanted to tell us that our hiring of the full-time counselor for elementary has had a huge impact. And I had an opportunity to meet with him because he asked me to be on a committee that wants to have a lot more transparency for the district and parents. And what he did was tell us all about what he does, and it's so obvious that a half-time person could not be doing what he is able to do in a full-time position. And he is seeing every student at least once a month. He visits classrooms, and has little mini lessons with them. And he also meets with various groups of students. And as he explained to me, he's not a psychologist, but he's a counselor. So he never meets one-on-one with students. It's always with small groups. And he is also going to start a positive, he's the positive behavior intervention leader, and he's going to be starting an in-house mentoring program, which some kids just need someone to check in with them, with their homework, and he's in the early stages of that. In addition, what I found that was very aggressive for a brand new teacher is he is going to apply, Carrie help me,
For a ramp certification.
okay, and it's a really prestigious certification, and he didn't want to hurry up and do it this year because this is his first year here, but he's going to really be methodical about it, and he's going to apply at the end of next year. And I think Jess told me that there was only 10 or 12 in the state, not districts, but individual schools that have this certification. And it's really heartwarming to see what we did and how much this is coming back to help students. The last thing is that she will be asking, or our superintendent may be asking, she would like an additional either kindergarten position for next year or a intervention teacher for that level, because she did a lot of studies about other districts, their class sizes. She talked to businesses, she talked to Shell, and she has projections, and they're only going to get larger. And
The classes, not
yeah,
Shell.
the class size, not Shell, yes. Class sizes will get larger, thank you. And her teachers and her are working on this, and they're not really quite sure yet which route that they are thinking of going. But so she's going to be asking for the superintendent is going to be asking for an additional. And I think if anybody wants, I have a handout that any of you can look at if you want to see what she did a PowerPoint for all of us.
I think she very succinctly, she meaning Dr. Hiles, very succinctly brought up two tipping points that we're facing at College Square. One is increased enrollment, which is a positive thing from a school perspective, but also brings some of its own issues. When you have 170 plus students and 7 sections to put them in, you know, simple math tells you that that's a pretty high number of kindergartners, a really high number of really any learners to have facing any one teacher. And when you add on top of that the second point that Director Yates was talking about, which is the additional needs that students are coming with, we're calling that another tipping point. For example, in all of College Square, we have 15 students who are on the autism spectrum and need some additional help and support. But in kindergarten alone, there are 10. So when you have the high class size plus the additional needs, you really begin to see this need for additional help. So I think she very succinctly put that presentation together for the board to say well, there's lots of things we could do, but in her estimation, either another kindergarten teacher, which fixes one problem, would be helpful, or a transition teacher would be helpful, which might be able to help other grades, because that's K1 and 2, so any one of those. Nevertheless, and then I'll stop with this, although this is really the bread and butter of what we do, the problems continue into our upper elementary. And it was one of the things that was experienced by parents last year with our third grade. So when this kindergarten group, let's just suppose that all 175-ish of them get to third grade, where they have 6 sections instead of 7, you've just increased your problem, right? If it's too many kids for 7 sections, it's really going to be too many kids for 6 sections. Now, they have some additional flexibility when they get there because they're going into special classes. For example, specials, by that I mean PE and music and art, so we're able to spread the kids out a little bit more. Nevertheless, it's still a problem. So this is one problem that we probably have one fix for the coming years, but in the next 3 years, we really need to make sure that we're looking into upper elementary.
Yeah, and my background also teaches me that you need to invest in your primary grades. I see our librarians here, and they do a lot for us at our local library, but you have to catch the kids in the earliest grades. So if we had the money, I would say we should do 2 teachers, but that's a whole nother issue. But I hope that we can at least get them 1. Robin, Bob, Scott, was there anything you wanted to add? You did a good job.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
What is ramp certification?
Yeah, it is a certification that allows him to teach a particular type of student and a particular curriculum, and it's prestigious within Pennsylvania.
It's another.
All right. Facilities and transportation, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, I had an idea of seeing if we can maybe set a committee meeting for that, just an initial. I talked to Mr. Hines about this, and it doesn't have to be an ongoing, like once a month thing, but I think initially if we can set a committee meeting and just learn more about, ask Mr. Fry here if maybe he can attend it and just give us some input on our transportation program, and then also just clue us in on some of the stuff with the facilities for Mr. Hines, if that's possible. So if we can maybe set that, I don't know if we need to do that right now, Scott, or if we can.
Yeah, we'll send an email out at the end to everybody who's on facilities
Okay.
and transportation.
Okay.
And get a couple dates and see what we can get.
If everybody's okay with that on the committee, I know who's Robin, Denise, I think you guys are on there. So if you guys are okay with that, I'm new, so I'd like to learn more about kind of what all the transportation side does and all the facilities too. So if we can do that, I'd appreciate it. And then the second thing would be, I know I've talked to a couple people that brought up, and I don't know if this is possible, Mr. Hines, but if we could schedule a facility walkthrough, if that's possible for anybody on the board that'd be interested, and if you could maybe take us through. I know I haven't been in some of these buildings in a lot of years. Is it possible to do something like that, where anybody interested, you could walk us through, show us some of the current projects that are going on,
Except the ones on the
upcoming
roof.
ideas, stuff like that. What's that, Luke?
I said except the ones on the roof. I don't want to go on any roof.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be easier for us to do it after school lets out, like.
Yeah, this would be
afternoon,
yeah.
Evening. Okay. Yeah, I think Dino and I can work that into the schedule. Why don't we try that after the committee meeting?
Okay. Yeah, because then we'll have an idea of some of the stuff that's going on. Then if we could schedule, I don't know if any other board members, I know, Luke, I think you expressed interest in doing something like that, but pick a day and time where we could kind of walk around and you can show us some of the stuff that's going on. Okay. That's it.
Excellent. All right. Employee relations, Mr. Bovalino?
No committee reports regarding employee relations right now.
All righty. Athletic committee, Mr. Bickerton?
Nothing to report.
Finance, that's me. Nothing new to report. Disciplinary, Mrs. Hill is not here, so Mr. Baradelli?
Scott, can I ask
Yep.
you a quick question for finance?
Sure.
I know we're kind of like at the beginning stages of the budget for this upcoming school year.
Mhm.
Is there going to be, well, I guess my question is, what's the process with the budget season, and what does the finance committee, I mean, do you set meetings throughout this process for us to
Yeah.
kind of get an idea on some of the things, or how does that process go?
Yeah, so typically, John works through, we essentially take this year's budget, and we look at things that we have to do, right? Salaries, benefits, paying the bills. We factor in all the increases that are due next year, and he also has, I don't know, John, what you call it, your master list of projects for capital expenditures, and then we really work from that point on what we can do and what we want to do from a tax increase perspective. Going with the Act 1 index, how much of that we need to take, doing things like hiring a new teacher add-on. So we do actually have, before any more budgets are going to be the preliminary and things like that, we have finance committee meetings for those. So
Okay.
John usually spearheads most of that organization, but we have meetings along the way.
Okay, all right.
I'd anticipate one in the next 30 days, John, is that fair? 30, 45?
Actually, you get that at the retreat.
Okay.
We'll get it in a couple weeks.
Okay. All right.
All right. Disciplinary, Mrs. Hill is not here, so Mr. Bardelli, any disciplinary?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay, that's good. School safety, Mr. Bardelli?
There will be a school safety meeting scheduled soon. There's a lot of things that our new board members are trying to get caught up on, so that we can then report back and be aware of some of the things that the prior board has done over the past number of years. That is continuing, so as soon as we get the safety meeting scheduled, we'll be able to share some more at the next opportunity.
Excellent.
Dr. Rowe, real quick, sorry, keep interrupting. I looked on our website, and we have, a committee was formed, an outside committee that consisted of, I think, Sean, I don't know if were you put on that? The safety, so I know it was like
It's called the
residents.
Citizens Advisory Committee for School Safety.
Yeah, and they were posting like minutes up through, it looked like March of last year, maybe, then it kind of all went dry. Is that committee still formed?
They're
or-
disbanded. They gave us their recommendations.
So the
So,
committee.
okay, that was just set for a certain period of time, and then it was done after.
The committee was created to get input from different community members with different backgrounds and specializations,
Okay.
with the goal realistically being to take a look at currently what we were doing and to find potential areas where we could improve and areas that we were doing that we thought we were doing pretty well at and how we could make adjustments if needed. And then ultimately the committee got together and made a presentation with suggestions to the board at that time.
Okay, all right.
And you were one of the representatives,
I was.
which is why he can speak so authoritatively.
Yes, I was on there with Director DeKetch and I were on that.
Okay.
With some outside. Beaver Memorial Library, Mrs. Yates.
This month, the library will continue with their Lego clubs for the older students, and that usually happens on Fridays. And the younger students with their parents have multiple story times for students and their parent to go to. And as I mentioned before, that they really help the students with the early reading and have all kind of activities for seniors. There's a knitting club. There's Friends of the Library if you want to get more involved.
Excellent. Legislative, Mr. Bardelli.
Nothing urgent to report.
All right.
Actually, I have a question. I want to go backwards real quick. When you were talking about our counselor at College Square, what is the mechanism for communication or the methodology for communication with the parents as far as what he's doing? And how is he tying in the good stuff, the bad stuff that he's helping to, that he's maybe identifying or he's promoting back at home? Because like right now, I have a kindergartner at that building, and I'd love to, I hope that he, through his work, is able to communicate, obviously the good things, but at the same time communicate, hey, this is of a concern, the bad things, That's probably not the appropriate way, but
No.
the concerning thing.
He's trying to work, we had a really long discussion, it was really good. He's trying to work in a proactive manner rather than reactive. So if he sees kids, for instance, that have anxiety, or the teacher has said, you know, you need to see so-and-so, so he will get a small group of, say, first graders who have anxiety, and he works with them on coping skills. The reason why he formed this committee, that's an excellent question, is to be more transparent. But Heather, I'm going to ask you, since you're here, I know you're very involved in the PTO. Has he communicated with the PTO in any way?
No, my baby's big now.
They're at the next.
Oh, they are already.
Yeah, I don't have any more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody, do you?
Okay, how about I would be happy to get an answer to Director Baradelli's question, and not only share that with the board, but also share it at our meeting next week. That way we can have a real direct answer about how that communication happens with parents when he interacts with their kids. Like, under what circumstances is he reporting back to parents, and in what times is he perhaps interacting with the kids in small groups, and that's not something that's reported. So I can get us a better answer
Or if
on
it's
that.
in the newsletter, their school newsletter. and I do.
Sure, absolutely. I think that'd be reasonable. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Beaver County CTC, that is me. Nothing new yet. We have our first meeting of the new board on January 23rd with a tour of the center, so I will report back next month. And the BVIU, Mr. Bobolino.
No, nothing. Still waiting for information to get started with that group.
All right, on to business. Phase 1B renovation contract and Phase 2A renovation spending.
So last month, you approved increasing the Phase 1B renovation from $500,000 to $2 million because we were able to find more things that we could do while school was in session. So this is just going to be, that contract should be ready to go for the 20th meeting. It's a standard AIA type contract. Phase 2A is the summer months, but we are finding things that we can do, we have to do ahead of schedule, ordering certain materials that have long lead times. So we're going to give you an estimate of what that number is going to be, and then asking you to allow us to proceed with that. And then the next month, the contract with the contractor will be on the agenda.
Excellent. Any questions, concerns? All right. Number 3, the natural gas contract.
Okay, so long story, I'll try and make it short. We broke away from the AIU for electricity and did great. We found a company that could do online bid and lower our electricity costs. We were never able to find anybody that could do that sort of thing with natural gas. So I allowed our contract, when it expires in the AIU contract for natural gas, it goes month to month with market-based pricing. And I've kind of been watching that and searching for a company. And I found a company that has a lot of local natural gas sources. And they've given me a proposal, just to give you an idea of the pricing, the market prices that we've seen for natural gas. And this is only covering the high school right now, just the high school. So in May of 2019, I'll proceed from May through December. We go from $1.86 to $1.92, $1.58, $1.43. This is all per 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas. To $3.83, $3.53, $4.25, $4.28. So you can see it naturally escalates as we get into winter. So if you get a cold spell, it'll spike. So when you're buying month to month like this, the prices get pretty volatile. If you can stand that volatility, you can probably save money in the long run. But it's a nightmare to try and budget for that. So I asked them for a contract, and we chose a 2-year agreement because we have the 2 elementary schools and the administrative office that all come due together in 2 years, and we want to try and get them all in one contract at that time period. So what he has proposed and what you'll see attached to the agenda is $2.37 per 1,000 cubic feet or per decatherm is how he's pricing it, which is pretty decent compared to the prices that we were seeing, and they'll lock that in for 2 years for us. So at this point in time, it's the best that I could find, and I think it's going to be much better than dealing with direct energy at the AIU. Direct energy has just as an additional side note, they have this annoying tactic that they use. When you get to towards the end of an agreement, 6 months out or a year out, they'll try and do a blend and extend contract, which is their way of, when they see prices dropping, of locking you in at a higher price than if you waited until the end. So I would like to get out of that.
What is our spend over the past 12 months? What did you calculate what our individual rate was every month over the past 12 months?
Well, that was the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 9 months is what I grabbed.
What's that average? Did you figure out? Because if we're going to do two what? 237?
So it looks like if I had, because it'd be weighted based on volume. So we're paying the most for the highest volume, which is October, November, December.
Yeah. Well, that would still factor into the average, would it not?
Yeah. So it would weight it higher.
Yeah.
So if you made me guess, sitting right here, I'd say probably about $4, $3, $3.54.
237 or whatever the number is.
Yeah, I think it's very realistic. Our total spend for all utilities is about $500,000 a year. Biggest spend is on electricity, followed by natural gas, followed by water and sewer.
All right. Any other questions?
What's our termination agreement with our current vendor now? Why couldn't we cut ties? Is there an out clause at all?
We let it expire, and we just go month to month with them.
I'm sorry, not here for the other two buildings and the administrative, but you said that there's 2 years left on that contract.
Yeah, no, we don't want to pay those penalties.
Okay. There are substantial penalties?
Yeah, we'll ride that out. And Janet's reviewing the 8-point font contract that they all sent me, 2 pages long. Let her deal with that.
Number 4, fixed asset valuation proposal.
Okay. So we have to have our assets valued. We go through a mini valuation every year, and about every 10 years you need to send the crew in, just like you would do an inventory at a grocery store, only they're doing an inventory and evaluation of all the assets that we own. And we're due for that. The reason you need to do that is because there are clauses buried in our property and liability insurance that basically say, hey, if we find out that your valuation is not accurate and you're below 90% of what you're supposed to be insured for, we're not paying for that. So this is something that we have to do. It's a very fair proposal. Valuation Engineers has been doing this for 4 years for us, and they're going to do the entire asset inventory and appraisal for $5,250, up from $4,950 when they did it in 2004. And then their annual valuation service is about $525 a year for 5 years. We'll probably pull the trigger on the, I think they have in here, optional annual accounting supplement, which is useful since in government accounting, you can't see our fixed assets on our balance sheet. We don't see any long-term assets, you don't see any long-term liabilities. They're buried on separate schedules. That's the reason why we create an audit report. That's where you can see them. So we use that to comply with the GASB regulations to create the audit report. So it's important that this be accurate as we go forward, and to do that, we have to do the revaluation.
John, do we When you're looking at a company like this, obviously they've done this before for us, but did we publicly bid this out and let other companies give us a proposal on this, or do we?
We're under the bid limit for this, so we don't have to.
Okay, so we don't have to put this out there and look at other.
When's the last time this company or a company like them did this for us?
2004, this company had done the last valuation.
So when they do that, we get the file of the report of all the things that they've taken inventory of.
Yeah, we've got two very thick books that give us detail on, one is a revaluation showing the original price and the replacement cost of the asset for insurance purposes. Then the other book is just a record of the every asset that we own that's depreciable. When it goes into service, when it went into service, what the total accumulated depreciation on it is and what the net is on it.
Obviously, from that information, there are certain decisions or things that we might be made aware of that we can take action on. Is that accurate?
Probably.
No?
Probably. The most valuable thing that you would get by looking at the original cost, the accumulated depreciation, and the net is what is the economic life remaining in your assets. And then you could compare that to what's the replacement cost.
Yeah.
And what is probably the most frustrating thing in government accounting is that you don't always see that replacement cost in those assets. And it's important to keep in the back of your mind, for the district, replacement costs for our facilities are probably in the range of $120 to $130 million.
Collectively.
Yeah.
All right, number 5, the Willows contract for prom.
Yeah. So the new sponsors overseeing this have convinced the kids that they should look locally, and they did. They got an agreement with the Willows. Willows has basically patterned their contract directly after the Wyndham Grand downtown, and only had to make a couple changes to it related to indemnification, gross negligence versus negligence, which always comes up. And they have a few blanks they need to fill in. Unfortunately, the person that can answer that has been sick, apparently. So I'm still waiting to hear back on the blanks, which are nothing more than what date do they need the down payment by and how much do they want. So that's kind of what we're waiting on. Hopefully I'll have that by the 20th for you.
All right, and 6, 7, and 8, revised board policy number 622, statement 34, first reading. Adopt revised board policy 138, first reading, and adopt new board policy 142, first reading.
I'll ask John to do policy 622 since that's within his wheelhouse.
Yeah, this relates directly to the valuation engineers and the valuation of the property that they do. Our capitalization policy had been $1,500. Any asset or group of assets greater than $1,500, we would depreciate and track through valuation engineers. When I got here, I had a conversation with the interim that was here, Bill Riley, and I thought that was crazy low, and Bill did as well. And we looked at a bunch of other school districts, and many of them were up at 5,000. So the policy allows us to go ahead and change this from time to time, but I wanted to make it official. I did the analysis at $5,000 individual asset or group depreciations. We capture 80% of the fixed assets, so there's nothing wrong. If we captured less than 80% of the movable fixed assets, then we would have to lower it below 5,000, but we're good at 5,000. So that's the only thing I'm changing it. Changing 1,500 to 5,000.
Okay. Then we have 2 policies. Let's see, the first one is 138. Just make sure I speak about them in the right order here. 138 is language instruction educational program for English learners, which was a really long way to say we need to provide English language services to students whose native language isn't English. Currently we have between 10 and sometimes as many as 15 students who have English language learning needs. So in the past, we've said ESL. Right now, the nomenclature is either ELL. Well, I guess ELL is the right nomenclature. And then we have an LIEP, which is the actual program that we set forth. This policy basically says that we're going to comply with what the state already says is important, that we're going to identify these students. We're not going to try and dissuade the families from accepting the services that we can offer to help them learn English. That would be a dandy way for some schools to limit their need for an ESL teacher or an ELL teacher. We don't do that. If the student needs the help, we want to get them the help to learn the language. The policy goes on to say that we're going to follow the state standards for learners who are just learning English. We're going to try and work them into the content, into their content courses, so we're not just going to put them off in some classroom by themselves. We're also going to make sure that they have an appropriately certified teacher, that we might use the intermediate unit. We have used the intermediate unit in the past. They are also having a difficult time finding enough ESL teachers. So we have gone off on our own and hired some people. We don't have a full-time staff person, because if we did have just one person, they wouldn't be able to service the entire district in a day. So it does actually make more sense for us to have these small contracts. The policy also talks about them being involved in an assessment. There is a very specific assessment for ESL students. And also program exit. This isn't something that we're going to keep a student in long-term. Rather, we're going to do the assessment process, and when it's time for them to exit that, we're going to have them back and, or I guess, integrate into our regular curriculum. And I think one other big piece is we're not going to, the policy has language that says we're not going to identify students as having a learning disability simply because they can't learn in English. And also, we're not going to exclude them from gifted services just because their native language isn't English. So there's a whole lot to this policy, but all it is just being in my estimation, a good school that really cares for their students. Questions on this policy before I move on to the next one?
How many EL students do we have in the district?
Right now we have 10, but we've had as many as 15 at a time.
What does, in the program exit, what is actively monitoring post 2 years? What does that entail?
That means after they've, after we've said that they have met all of the criteria to leave the ESL program, or the LIEP program, is the new wording, then we want to watch them for 2 years to make sure that that was really the correct decision. What are their grades like? Are they doing well in their other classes? So it's not just like, oh yeah, you're fine, go on, and then the kid fails. We know we have a responsibility to say, perhaps that student wasn't ready after all. So we're just going to continue to monitor them for 2 years.
This
And again,
applies-
that's standard.
This applies for any EL student in any grade?
Yes. K-12. And the other policy is 142, and that is about migrant students. This is a new policy for the district. And again, this is just being a good school who cares for the students who come to us. We will educate any student who comes to our doors who lives in our community, or any of our communities that feed into this school, and that includes migrant students. This policy actually reminds me of our homeless student policy, because we want to make sure that whether they're a homeless student or a migrant student or a student with special needs, that they are engaged in our curriculum, that we are working with their parents, that if it is important for them to have Title I services, that we offer those services to the students and their families. And it basically says that we're going to develop the procedures to ensure that this happens, which is standard in all of our policies. Our solicitor did point out that it would be most appropriate for us to have a definition of migrant student. I believe this was the policy, is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's the one.
Right? Yeah, absolutely, we're gonna put that in there, and I believe she has a couple of other suggestions for change, which we'll bring for our second reading.
How many migrant students do we have currently?
None. But again, that is something that is subject to change. We do have a lot more transient students, but there currently isn't a student that we would classify as migrant, given the definition that we would all work from, which is absent from this policy.
All right, on to C, personnel. We'll do these together. 1, hire Coach Bumbless. 2, approve stipend adjustment Burt.
Can I ask who is this, what is this coach for?
Assistant coach for basketball on boys is Bumbless, and assistant coach for basketball girls is Heidi Burt.
Yeah, right, correct. Correct, and we need their stipends to, the number 2 on there is to make the adjustment in their stipends so that there's parity in pay.
Can I ask a quick question? This was brought to my attention. If an assistant coach, or I guess any coach, a head coach assistant, anybody who's going to be paid on a stipend for athletics, if they want to donate their stipend back to the school, are we able to do that on a gross versus net basis? Like, could we create like a memorandum of understanding with like the BAEA or someone to not have to go through PSERS and taxes and all that?
I'm going to defer to both our solicitor and to our business manager. We actually have had this conversation, and I'll say, unfortunately, it's more complicated than one would suggest. It would be easier for us to pay and correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be easier for us to pay the person and have them turn around and then donate the money back to the district than it would be to say, how do you take something from an athletic fund and put it back into our general fund and play these games with money that may or may not be copacetic, right? Great word. So
Fair enough.
if there's anything additional that the two of you would like to add, or no?
Just cleaner.
It's
Because the IRS will find it.
That's right.
right.
Okay.
So much cleaner, and it's appreciated because there have been a couple of people who have wanted to do something like this. It's appreciated when they think of the district in this way. So if they're willing to accept the pay and then donate it back, that certainly makes it easier.
Excellent. Okay. Any questions on this? Comments?
Real quick, so for these positions, is that like, so for Bumbless's pay, is that a set price, or is that based on negotiating with that person based on their skill set or what they bring to the table?
Okay, so it often deals with the amount of years that they've been a coach. And in the past, it has dealt with the number of people that have come to the game. They had a relatively complicated, and I don't think altogether fair, formula that they used. So how much money does that particular sport bring in? How many people generally attend? How many students are in the program? I think what we're most interested in changing is, again, the parity between the male and female sports. When all other things are equal, is there equal pay? But I absolutely think that that's something that the athletic committee should be taking up. Take a look at how are those numbers arrived at, and where is there a lack of equity? John, if you have something to add to that, you might have something to add to that, I'm not sure.
Yes, it's always been, from my perspective, always been a concern because Title IX carries potential liability issues with it if you don't have parity.
So can we get a copy of the coaches and their pay, and so we can look at that?
Absolutely. As a member of the athletic committee, Director Yates, be happy to get that for you. And I think that is something that would be worthwhile looking at during your next meeting.
And Dr. Rose, so the process with this, interviewing, coming up with this number, and is that presented to the committee folks first for them to approve, and then that's presented to the board, or what's the process with establishing that pay? Going
Right.
through
As with so many things, it depends. With varsity sports, the board has said that when the varsity coach is being hired, that they
Head
want
coach.
to, yes, varsity head coach, thank you, that they want to be involved in that. And so at that time, the committee members involved in the interview process would hear what number is being offered to that coach. And certainly, we would be saying, well, this is how much we paid the previous coach who had this many years of experience and had this many years in our district, and this is why we came up with this number, or this stipend amount. When it is not a varsity head coach, then no, generally speaking, the entire board would be receiving that in their packet prior to a work session. And then if there are questions or concerns about the amount of money, you would bring it up in this setting.
I can tell you that if you look at our pay for most of our athletic programs, I won't say all of them, but most of them, we are paying at or below county average for most of our coaches in the athletic department.
So next week, the two items we can expect: one, to hire the boys varsity basketball assistant. The second one is just to approve the adjustment.
That's correct.
All right, on other, number one, the overnight field trip for Hershey.
Okay, this is for our band students. This is for Mr. Skanga, who is requesting that 4 adults and 45 students be permitted to go to Lancaster and Hershey Park. And you received in your packet an update about what they'll be doing there, but it involves a performance while they're there. We also have a district nurse attending the trip to coordinate all of the medical needs that might arise. All of the cost for this, which is about $325, is paid by the students. And the cost of registration is also covered by the students and their families.
And we have male and female chaperones.
Male and female chaperones, absolutely. You know, that's a great question.
All right, number two, approve the change to high school registration book for app development with Swift. Well, this is what Mrs. Yates was talking about.
Right. The brief version is we have really been trying to scale up our coding offerings. It's really another language that we can say that we are offering to our students. So their students are introduced in the K through 6th grades to small pockets of coding. In 7th grade, all students take a Swift Coding 1 course. In 8th grade, they're permitted to take an elective course, which is a Swift Coding 2. And then this is the 3rd course in the row. It's called App Development with Swift, which is basically the students are going to learn how to create an app that can be placed in the App Store. Mr. Hank, being the master teacher that he is, and I don't say that lightly, but he is somebody who is absolutely capable of doing what he says he'd like to do here, and that is, even if you didn't take the level 1 and the level 2, he's willing to accept you into this course, provided you're willing to do the catch-up work. So we are really cognizant of not excluding students who are coming to us in 9th grade. Oftentimes that's when we get students from private and parochial schools. Also, that's when our students from Midland begin to attend. So we don't want them to be excluded from one of our courses simply because they didn't come to school here in our primary grades. So that's one of the major reasons, but also another major reason why we can do this is because of who the teacher is. And the book for the course is an open source book that is put out by Apple, and it is digital. We don't have to purchase it. We don't need the rights for it. They will continue to update it, and it is what the teacher wants to use. So we don't need another teacher, and we don't need any resources. We are simply going to realign his schedule to incorporate this class. And briefly, the next step is for an AP computer coding course. And we are hoping that the following year, so this course is for next year, and then the following year we are hoping to have an AP course. So we're finally arriving at that curriculum place where we want to be, where we're finally offering enough in the coding area.
All right, number 3, Natatorium update and repair.
So just to review, we have 2 bids for the liner and gutter, but one of the bidders excluded excavation. So there are differences in these bids, and we're trying to get them to be comparable. And so what we have to do is do what's called request voluntary submissions from both bidders and compare apples to apples. Unfortunately, because they wanted it excluded, we have to go get that price estimate from another contractor, give it to them, and then ask them, what will you charge us on top of that to oversee this excavation? That's one example. And there are other examples of things that we need to include options, and we want them to price the overseeing of it, since they didn't want to do the option, so that we are comparing apples to apples. And of course, you read about in the memo, if you read it, I'm trying to give you a feel for other risks that are involved in this. This is probably the most complicated project that Dino and I and Mike have been involved with at this school. We thought the humidity problem was the most complicated, but this grows as we dig into the design of the pool and the age of everything around it, and we talk to other experts. We just are trying to make you aware of all the issues. We're going to try and quantify that risk as best we can, but at the end of the day, there will be things that we won't be able to see that are buried and that are 52 years old. So we will clarify that as more information comes forward.
So Pete, I'm sure you were hoping for a more definitive answer, but we're trying to dot I's and cross T's, but we're working on it.
So next week, there's not going to be a vote. We're pushing it another month.
We're at the mercy of the subcontractor and then the 2 bidders to get back to us after they get the pricing. We were shooting for the end of the month, but that may not happen if someone says, oh, it's going to take me 2 weeks to do this.
The board can choose, once all of the information is in, the board can choose to hold a special session specifically for this. So I wouldn't necessarily rule that out. At the same time, so that it gives the appearance of being as transparent as possible, I might recommend that you not do that. I want you to know that you have the right to do that, to call a special session. But we would want to make sure that that would be widely publicized so that people don't perceive that you did it outside of the normal sequence of board meetings.
What is there a rush from your perspective?
Well, I mean, those of you who have construction experience understand that, you know, this isn't something that's just going to happen overnight, that we're going to approve it and the guys are going to be able to make these, you know, decisions and say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and we have the equipment, we have the material, we have the fabrication already ready to go. You know, there's a lot of stuff that has to take place between now and June 1st, which is what we had scheduled or what we were hoping, you know, that it would be. And so every day, not to mention the fact that, you know, we're not the only bid that they're putting out, any one of these companies. And if they lock in a schedule, you know, that'll push us out another year. And to me, that's just
Along those
inexcusable.
lines, you're right. One of the bidders indicated they had a 12-week lead time on their stainless steel and their fabrication on gutters. The other one did not, surprisingly, because they own the fabricator. So that was sort of surprising to us.
So they have a 12-week lead time on stainless steel?
On the fabrication.
On the fabrication, but what about the raw
They
stainless
build
steel
it
to
shape
fabricate?
it. They don't know the exact shape, what they're replacing, so they demo and cut the old gutters out. Then they get the shape.
I know everybody's got a lot on their plate, you know, I'm more than happy to help bird dog this. You know what that means?
Right now, we're kind of waiting
I can make it happen.
for other information.
If you need me to make those phone calls, I'll be happy to.
Okay.
What's the end
The
date?
squeaky wheel gets the oil.
What's the end date that we have to be privy to?
It's September 30th. It's perpetual. It was September 30 last year. It was September 30 this year.
First time on the board, I don't know.
It sounds like it might be September 30 in 2021. I mean, the frustration you can see, I'm getting a little frustrated because the quotes were back November 26th. And here we are coming up on January 26th. That's 2 months for information. And again, I know plates are full. I'm just saying,
Well, at this point, it has nothing to do with plates being full here. It is a need for them to be responsive.
if they're not being.
If we want to cut to it, we can say that they're non-responsive at this point, and throw both bids out and do it again. I don't think anyone wants to do that, which is why we'd rather say, respond to this request that we have so that we can make, and get an answer as quickly as possible. I think
I
the way that
understand
we're
that,
going
Gary.
is the most expeditious.
I understand that, but are we following up on a regular basis with
The
phone calls?
answer to that is
and
yes.
say- We are.
Yes.
Are we able to set a date, John? You know, have this back
You wanna call her?
to be considered
I
responsive?
will,
have
I
it back
will.
by-
Carrie knows I'll do it. I absolutely will call every day.
Yeah, I mean.
John knows I'll do that.
If it weren't
John
inappropriate
knows
for
it.
you to be involved in the bid process, I might let you do that.
Make a motion for special powers. Go ahead. I'd be
Special
more than
exception.
happy to.
Can we set a date, John, to be considered responsive? Please have these back by X date.
We can, you have to be careful though.
Okay.
Because you've already advertised and done the bid, and now you're asking for voluntary submissions so we can compare. If you're unreasonable in a voluntary request, you can end up in legal trouble.
A reasonable day.
Reasonable day.
You can't say 24 hours,
Right,
right?
right. But we need the
Can-
subs to get back to us with numbers as well.
Okay, other?
Any other, so I know we have, oh, go ahead.
I would like to request an athletic committee meeting.
No. Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
All right, so we would like to have an athletic committee meeting to discuss the pool. Is that, do we have to
I
set
think-
an agenda?
And facility.
Talk, kind of meet through with Alan for the committee, kind of meet Alan, was it a minute,
Okay.
meet Alan, talk to Alan, see what he's got going on, what his priorities are, and talk about it. So let it, kind of, the general meeting, I think would be a good idea, yeah.
Okay. So we have athletic.
And I'd like
Faci-
to meet the new director.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
Al.
Al.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like a meet and greet kind of thing.
All right, so we want athletic to be scheduled, safety to be scheduled, facilities and transportation to be scheduled for a potential walkthrough and with Mr. Fry. Any other board committees? I know we're gonna get together with finance sometime in the next 30 to 45 days. Anything else?
Committee meetings?
Yep.
Other business?
Any other business?
Yeah, I would like the personnel, actually, did we put personnel in there?
Employee relations.
Employee relations? I would like us to get together and do a blind survey to the district. Just get the pulse of what our teachers are thinking and feeling, what our administrators are thinking and feeling, and see what comes back. Maybe we learn something, maybe we don't. I don't know. But I'd love to set up a blind survey for them. I know there's a couple, Mary Lou sent me one organization that has one built specifically for this. I can share that with you, Dr. Rowe. And then figure
This-
out what avenue would
Yeah.
be best to do that.
And this might be a conversation that we definitely want to get the union involved with to make sure that
Yeah.
they feel comfortable, that they're, that they feel comfortable that their representatives, if they're taking a survey, that it is in fact blind. We maybe let them help administer it,
Yeah.
something to make sure.
Or why don't we even take a step back from all this and say, let's have an employee relations committee meeting where you say
Can discuss this.
what it is you would like to survey. What types of questions are you trying to get at, and have we done anything like that recently where that information might be responsive to your request?
I should have asked that first. Have we done something?
Well, I don't know what it is you're wanting to survey,
Okay.
so I don't know.
All right, that's fair.
Just
That's
have
fair.
to- and then there's this. Yeah. All right. Anything from, I know, sorry, Mrs. Witzke, you had your hand up before?
Oh,
About it?
yeah, how, is this, Bumpus, his hiring, is that for the varsity coaching, or is that for, how many coaches does varsity already have? I think I might have counted 6 or 7 sitting down there who gave me other.
Yeah, I am not sure how many they have and how many are paid versus unpaid.
Right.
Yeah.
See, oftentimes what happens is there's a particular amount of money that's set aside. This is something that grates on Director Yates too. She's talked about it in the past, particularly with football, but generally there is a set amount of money that's given to a particular sport.
Okay.
And if they want to carve that up amongst 15 people, knock yourself out. If those 15 people are willing to work for this much. So if you need a direct answer for how many assistant coaches they have, I can get you that information. If it's really more of a how that looks,
Right.
okay, then I hear
It's
you.
just the money down.
Okay.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Got it, okay.
Three other things before we go on to the voting session. I want to commend our administration and teachers and everyone involved. They received 3 grants, $1,000 for a STEAM walk at the middle school, $1,000 for a story walk at College Square, and a $25,000 grant to connect the classroom and workspace. So they take a lot of time and effort, usually outside of their normal working time and effort, to help us with these. So to all parties involved, thank you for that. And with that, I think we can move on to the voting session. Anything else before we get to that? All right, so for our voting session, we are going to start with a calling to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. We have a flag behind us. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a roll call, Mr. Hines.
Mr. Baradelli.
Here.
Mr. Bickerton.
Here.
Mr. Bovalina.
Here.
Mrs. DeCatch. Mrs. Hill. Mrs. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Thomas. Here. And Mrs. Yates.
Here.
Okay, missing 2.
Okay. Welcome to the visitors. Visitors are welcome to address the board concerning agenda items at the time the board discusses them. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We had one executive session to discuss some pending legal matters before this. And there were no revisions or additions to this rather long agenda. We'll move on to new business. Item A, approve the request for overnight field trip for 5 students and 1 adult to attend PMEA District 5 Chorus Festival at Greenville High School from January 16th through 18th, 2020. Cost for the trip is paid from the music department budget. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Any comments from the visitors? Not all at once. Do I have a move to adjourn to executive session to discuss potential litigation?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you for coming.